It's weird looking back on all the accessories that were released on the Wii. Nintendo is a company who have brought a lot of good innovation to gaming, but with the Wii, while the motion controls made the console a success, there were a lot of misses on the console. I'm going to list some of the Wii's accessories and see how many of them you use more than once. The Wii Wheel, the Wii Zapper, Wii Balance Board, Wii Speak, and the Wii Maracas. Not every Wii accessory was a terrible idea, but none of them really took off, with most of them only being compatible with a few games. The accessory where this is the most disappointing is the Motion Plus. The Motion Plus added more precise motion controls, which in terms of gameplay added tons of possibilities, but very few games used the thing. One game that did use it though was Red Steel 2, a sequel to the Ubisoft Wii launch title. Red Steel 1 wasn't horrible as it had some good ideas, but the execution with the controls were off. It sold well though, so Ubisoft decided to use the Motion Plus to address a lot of the problems people had with the first game. So is it everything a sequel should be, or does it still feel limited? Let's have a look. The game is set in some Western Japanese dimension where you are the last member of your clan. You find out that your clan was attacked by a man called Shinjiro, who did it because you have a sword called the Soro Katana, which is meant to be very powerful. You spend the game hunting Shinjiro to get revenge for your clan. There is next to no setup for the story, as you just get thrown into what's happening and the story gets explained throughout the game. It's nice the game doesn't waste any time and it gets you right into the action, with the game starting out with you getting dragged behind a motorbike. However, without proper setup you never get sucked into the story in any way, as you have very little context about what's going on at first. The story isn't bad and it gets the job done, but it's nothing special. It's also odd how similar the story feels to Red Steel 1's story, despite these games not being connected in any way. A quick nitpick I want to mention is that during the cutscenes the game constantly tells you can skip the cutscenes, which is something that really needs to stop in games. The cutscenes are pretty cool in Red Steel 2, but it's distracting having text on the screen during them, and it's completely unnecessary. Red Steel 2 is a first-person shooter, but with this being on the Wii, you move with the analog stick, but you look and aim using the Wiimote's pointer. In this game, however, as well as shooting enemies, at any time you can swing the Wiimote to slash enemies with your sword. You can perform a more powerful slash by using a wider swing, and you can push the Wiimote forward for a stab attack. Thanks to the Motion Plus, the controls work really well, but they also work well because the game is designed around them. During fights you lock onto enemies automatically, so as you're waving the Wiimote around, all your moves are performed relative to whoever you're locked onto, which makes things very smooth. Moving around and aiming works a lot better here than it did in Red Steel 1, and it takes very little time to get used to. They're as good as first-person shooter motion controls can be, but still have the same advantages and disadvantages as other Wii FPSs. You can be very precise with aiming, which makes headshots a lot easier, but moving isn't as simple. Thanks to the lock-on system though, it isn't a problem, but while these controls are the best FPS controls I've seen in a Wii game, if you hate motion controls in general, I doubt this game will win you over. Throughout the game you can buy upgrades, which includes new weapons, new armor and new moves. There are a decent number of extra moves in this game which add depth to the sword combat. For example, there is a move where you swing your Wiimote downwards while holding A and B that creates a shockwave knocking over enemies. The extra moves are fun to use, and while I didn't unlock all the moves, I had no problems using any of the moves I had unlocked. None of them require specific swipes, so while you can perform precise slashes because of the Motion Plus, you don't have to in the middle of a frantic fight. The upgrade system isn't bad, but could be better. During the game you have to talk to certain people and each of them offer different upgrades. If you're saving up for something in particular though, once you have the right amount of money it can be a pain trying to get back to the right person to get the upgrade. It would have been nice if you could have brought stuff whenever you wanted, or have only one person with all the upgrades. The second thing about the upgrade is that, like a lot of video games, the money system isn't balanced. At the beginning of the game you have to make sure to collect money and be smart about what you buy, but very quickly you build up enough money to buy whatever you want. It's not really a problem, but the only reason to explore the game and do the side missions is to get more money, but you don't really need it, so everything outside the story can feel a bit pointless. As I mentioned, there are side missions in this game, although the game is ultimately linear. The game is split into different areas which you can fully explore, but once you beat all the story missions in that area, you have to go to the next one and you can't return to the previous ones. It's a very limited open world structure which I personally like. It matches the style of the game, which is very arcadey. Whenever enemies show up, you're told how many of them there are, and the fight ends once that counter hits 0. Your health also completely regenerates after every fight. The health system is okay, but can be a bit annoying. There's nothing wrong with it, but because you use guns and swords at the same time, so do the enemies. This means while you're fighting one guy, you can lose a lot of health because someone decides to shoot you in the back. You can avoid attacks and bullets by dodging with the A button, but later on in the game when you have to fight people with Gatling guns, you can die in certain cheap ways. The graphics are very similar to Borderlands as they are cel shaded, although the game is more about a hybrid between samurais and westerns. The game does look good, but there is very little variety in the locations. Areas aren't as distinct from each other as you would have liked, meaning the game tends to blur into one. There are boss battles which I enjoyed, although they come down to just blocking and then slashing. The story is about 7 hours long, which for a current FPS is good enough. However, there is very little outside of the story. There's no multiplayer, and the only extra in single player is a challenge mode. In challenge mode you literally replay parts of the games, cutscene included, so it adds very little length to the game. The main game is good, but as an overall gaming package you might be left wanting more. Red Steel 2, despite having nothing to do with Red Steel 1, is a good example of how sequels should be done. It addresses the majority of problems from the first game while still feeling like its own original title. The combat is fast and fluid, and it's great to play a game that uses the Wii motion controls in this kind of way. It comes short of being amazing though due to its lack of content, but doesn't mean what isn't here isn't enjoyable. My score is 8.0 out of 10. It doesn't quite compare to the other AAA titles this generation, but that doesn't stop Red Steel 2 from being a fun original experience.